We shall now have a session on democracy and social media. And I would like to introduce you to Olivia Stokes Dreier, who is a senior research fellow for Toda Peace Institute on global challenges to democracy. And you are also, for many years, executive director of the Karuna Center for Peacebuilding. And in cooperation with local partners, you have developed peacebuilding programs in over 20 conflict-affected countries. I could make it longer, but now they know you. You are the democracy person here in the panel. And Lisa, you are also a senior research fellow at the Toda Peace Institute, where you direct the program Social Media, Technology and Peacebuilding. And you are professor of the practice of peacebuilding at the University of Notre Dame's Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies. So now I have introduced you, and I would like to open with asking Olivia if you agree that in recent years democracies around the world have given ground to more autocratic governance in a process called democratic backsliding.
Yes, I do agree. And I think I want to just say that in talking about democracy, also, it's not a pretty picture in the world right now. I feel like much of what we'll be saying today paints a grim picture of where we are in the world. So I hope in our conversation as well, we'll look to some points of hope and I think with Lisa's work especially, we will. But yes, there has, over the last 15 years, democracy has been backsliding or eroding around the world. And at this point in the world, almost 3/4 of the world's population live in countries that either have full-blown autocracies or what we call electoral autocracies, where elections happen, but they're not free and fair, that the country is a democracy in name only. There may be political parties, but there's a party at top that controls everything, where there is no space for civil society, where there isn't freedom of press, and where there's very few constraints on the executive. And the judicial system is really at the beck and call of the executive. So we are seeing this backsliding everywhere.
Thank you, Olivia. And I'd say to both of you that you are welcome to comment on each other also without waiting for me to ask questions. But I have a second question to you, Olivia. And this is about a word that we have already used quite a lot in my talk, polarization.
Yeah.
And I call this in my talk a process where societies are divided into two sharply contrasting groups or sets of opinions or beliefs. And now I ask you, I assume you are right, you agree that there has been a lot of polarization lately?
Yes.
How dangerous is it?
Yeah, and actually the statistics, or those who study democracy around the world, according to different indices, have noticed growing polarization around the world, and where opposing views, often associated with different political parties, they get more and more entrenched, and then you get a negatively reinforcing cycle where they move further and further away, and to the point where you see the other group almost as your enemy. You can't agree with anything. And for democracy to function well, a healthy democracy, you need to have healthy debate and disagreement, both over the future direction of the country and around specific policies. But I think with the kind of polarization we're seeing, that's no longer the case. And I have to say, I'm American, and in America, we're seeing this extreme polarization. And I think one of the reasons why it's so dangerous is that political leaders, or those who tend towards more autocratic tendencies, like Trump, are very skillful at manipulating that polarization to their own political gain, which in turn increases the polarization. But I think Lisa's going to have a lot more to say about this phenomenon, and particularly how social media has been playing into it.
Exactly, because you recognize also the role of social media in the polarization.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
but I want Lisa to speak to it.
That's Lisa's specialty, so I would like to ask you about to what extent social media is a driver of polarization.
So of course, we had polarization even before there was social media. Is it on now? Yes. So of course we had polarization even before social media. But what we have seen in the last 20 years is the use of a technology designed with algorithms, which I think we'll talk about a bit later today, that amplify messages which are most divisive of humanity. And so, we've said actually at the United Nations for many years that wars start in the minds of people before they hit the battlefield. And we know now that Russia began propaganda about Ukraine to divide the country, to polarize within Ukraine years before actually Russia invaded. So I think we should not be separating sort of hard security, soft security, or thinking about social media as somehow a peripheral issue, that actually the battleground is in people's minds. And it is this toxic polarization of us versus them. Societies divided and turned against themselves, which is a military strategy. It is a strategy of divide and conquer. And actually, Russia, in their propaganda, have been very explicit about this, that if you can get within a country and turn people against each other, this sets the stage for the collapse of democracy, which is exactly what we're seeing around the world. So technology and social media is not just a peripheral thing. It's not just a lighthearted, fun thing. It is now seeding in our minds a toxicity which is extremely dangerous to democracy and to the ability for people to create societies, which I think that the Toda Peace Institute works for, which are nonviolent and which are just and sustainable.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you also about a special word which has become common everywhere in latest years, and that is the word algorithm.
Yes.
And I tried to look up algorithm on the web and see how it could be defined. And the best definition I could find among the little list I saw was that it's a data tracking system in which people's search history and browsing habits are used to present them with similar materials. So I wonder if you could say if that definition holds, and you could say something about who controls the algorithms that decide what we see on our screens, on the mobiles and on the computers.
Okay, that is one kind of algorithm, what you're reading there. But algorithms are basically used to mathematically rank the information that is presented to us. So the world now and the information environment that we all live in is very diverse, and people cannot look at all of the information. What social media algorithms are doing is tailoring every individual's unique perspective, what their search history is, what they look at on social media. It creates a mathematical model of that predicts what will keep them on the platform longer. And that mathematical prediction is the algorithm. And we each have the algorithm is looking for what we each are interested in and what we each will keep us longer on a platform, because the longer we're on the platform translates into more profit for the advertisers who are making money off of the platform. So this is the whole profit model of social media is driven by these algorithms. It ends up creating people who see completely different types of information. So if I type in what is the war on, or what is Taiwan and what kind of government does it have, I would get completely different information than somebody else, just given our search history. So the algorithm is choosing which information to prioritize for us. Not all algorithms do that, though. So the kind of technology that I study is called democracy technology or deliberative technology, and it uses algorithms that intentionally show people the information from different points of view and looking at where there is common ground across groups. So instead of polarizing people by giving them opposite information that presents them with a very divided sense of the world, deliberative technology uses an algorithm that helps people develop a shared sense of reality, a shared ability to make sense of the world. And this is what is really critical, and it's the magic of dialogue. Josiah Toda, the founder of the Toda Peace Institute, really has always emphasized the importance of dialogue, this ability for people to sit with each other and talk with each other and make sense of the world together. And I think this is what social media has decayed for us. It makes it so difficult for people to understand each other. And so we're trying to design new technology that helps people make sense together by listening to other people, by being in dialogue with each other, and technology that supports that humanity rather than decays or makes it go away.
Would it be right to say that these big tech companies, that they are using secret algorithms that make people disagree and hate each other, while you are engaged in creating kind of counter technology with other algorithms, which allow people to induce people to instead have dialogue and deliberation?
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, what big tech, I'm talking about TikTok and I'm talking about Meta and X, they have found the most profitable algorithms are ones that portray very divided information and very antagonistic, conflict-full of emotion and anger and outrage. And so that is what many of us see on our feeds is sort of a very sharp distinction between us versus them. And it's a choice. And unless governments are going to start regulating the algorithms, which many of us believe they need to, we are left with big tech supporting autocracies around the world. So we call these techno-autocracies because the decline of democracy is correlated with the use of these algorithms that divide the world and that turn people against each other and makes it so difficult for people to understand and make sense of the world. They turn toward an autocrat.
If I can jump in here, Lisa, I wonder if you could also say a little bit more about how the use of those technologies can sort of humanize those with whom one disagrees. Because I can say for myself, I don't think I know anybody who voted for Trump. And the news media that I consume is full of outrage about what's happening in the US, which I'm in total agreement with. But what I realize for myself is it doesn't support me being really curious about why people voted for Trump, or what are the grievances that they were experiencing that led them to, because I feel like it plays on that outrage and that anger. That's what hooks us in. So I know from hearing from you that there is also a way in which the technology can do that, and I'd be interested to hear more.
So if people who voted Trump, are they using the deliberative technology, and can they be made to use it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But countries around the world, I think last year in my presentation to this audience, I gave you some examples of where deliberative technology is being used. We are further advanced than we are a year ago, so now it's being deployed in several US states for statewide conversations. And it's already bringing Democrats and Republicans together in South Carolina, in Nevada, in New Jersey. So we know that these technologies are capable of depolarizing people, are capable of supporting dialogue across the lines of conflict. And so, it's really a race against time at this point. Can we deploy these new deliberative technologies that support dialogue at a speed and scale that keeps up with the spread of autocracy? Yeah. Autocracy has big tech behind it. They've made it really impossible for us to regulate technology in the United States, and have not yet really embraced these deliberative technologies. But I think we have a lot of citizens in the United States who are working together to try to hold our country together. And so I do have hope. If you've seen the citizens in Minneapolis in the recent weeks, you see how much, really decades of education on dialogue. So Kevin Clements and I, worked in the United States and with Olivia too. Some of us have poured decades of our lives into teaching about dialogue and how to facilitate and how to work together across the lines of conflict. There's a temptation to think it hasn't worked. But on the other hand, if I look at Minneapolis, I see all of these people cooperating and protecting their neighbors, delivering food, really working together to protect immigrants in the United States. And I think we have to say this is a sign of hope, that people are willing to stand up and defend each other. And Americans, people in the United States, are not laying down and letting their democracy disappear. We are out in the streets in numbers we've never seen before. Millions of people protesting no kings. There's another massive protest in a few weeks. And weekly dialogues being held across the country.
I will return to you in a little while to ask you about Afghanistan. But I will first ask Olivia to present her project, which is Democratic Lighthouse. That's one of your projects, which is a beautiful appearance on the web.
Yeah. So at Toda, I would say that as I think about the causes of this tremendous backsliding we're seeing around the world, I think there are many different ones. I think it relates to the huge rise in inequality that was spoken to earlier. Also, though, just a sense that democracy isn't working very well to meet 21st century challenges, whether it's mass migration, climate change, all the challenges that are facing us, and that people are really losing faith in democracy, in democratic institutions. So at Toda, I'll get to your question in a second, Stein, but I think at Toda, as we've been working on this and thinking about how do we defend against this backsliding, how do we build democratic resilience, of course you have to think about the institutions. In America, one of the ways we're pushing back against Trump's excesses is in the courts, challenging. Happily, the Supreme Court yesterday actually came out against the tariffs, but there's been a huge number of efforts there. I think there's going to be a lot of activity around the midterm elections, so fighting things at the ballot box, as long as we have elections, is extremely important. But it's also a question of how can civil society really engage in new ways. And what we've seen is that autocracies around the world are supporting each other. It doesn't matter what their ideological stance is. They might be communist, they might be Islamist, they might have no political ideology other than to enrich their own, the autocrats to enrich their own pockets. But they've been trading arms, trading spyware, trading techniques for suppressing peaceful protests. So our feeling has been that there needs to be more connection between democracy movements around the world. So we've created this web platform that we're calling Democracy Lighthouse, and we have 300 democracy research institutes from around the world on the site. And we're creating opportunities for them to engage with each other around thinking about sharing their ideas for how to defend against democracy, but also how to reimagine democracy in ways that will meet our current challenges, to talk about what their institutes are doing, to share writings, to share ideas. So we're hoping that will be a lively exchange and create more of a global dialogue, really, around democracy.
I think both of you respond actually very well to the question that we had in the Q&A session, where we wanted to have some hope for young people. And I turn to Afghanistan,
Please.
because Afghanistan, I think, would be almost the last country I would expect that you could experiment with deliberative technology, but that's exactly what you are intending to do. Please, how can that come?
So I worked in Afghanistan for 5 or 6 years back 20 years ago. And at the time, the youth movement in Afghanistan has been very strong, that the youth of Afghanistan want democracy. They want a system of inclusive governance. And so I've been working with these youth in Afghanistan now for about 20 years. So they're getting older, and so am I. And deliberation and democracy have a very long history. This is not a Western idea. In Islam, the idea of a shura, where you sit in a circle and you listen to each other, is the same historic, social technology of human beings listening to each other. It has a very long history in Islam. So deliberation is not a foreign concept for them, and neither is democracy. And I think that the challenge of the day is that elections are only one sign of democracy. And democracy is going to be continuing among communities and among people all over the planet, even if our governments are no longer allowing elections, or if they're ruling by autocracy. And so I think what deliberative technologies allow us to do is continue to practice democracy, continue to practice listening to each other, discussing things together, and making decisions together about how we want to try to change the world to be more peaceful and to be more nonviolent. And so with this group of Afghans, we are working together on a design of a future inclusive governance. So they're basically writing a new constitution for some future when there will be an opportunity to plan a government in Afghanistan that is inclusive of all the ethnic groups, that includes women and men, youth and elders. And so maybe we're dreamers, but also maybe we're strategic in looking 20 years down the line and saying, you have to start where you can start. So right now there's not democracy in the government in Afghanistan, but we can practice democracy by forming a constitution together and listening and exchanging together.
I think one of the reasons I find that work so exciting, Lisa, it's amazing that it can be happening in an autocracy to begin with. But also, from what I hear and what I learn about people's dissatisfaction with democracy, even in places like the US, that till recently had a functioning democracy, at least somewhat, is they just don't feel like their voices are heard. They just don't, and they don't feel like their elected representatives are hearing them, that their government is responsive. So it strikes me that this is an opportunity to have just a really wide range of voices heard and considered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could add one last question to you both, since you are in the United States. Do you think that democracy can be revived in the United States? Perhaps ask Lisa first.
Yes. It's not going to die. So again, we can't equate democracy with elections. And we have to realize that there are all kinds of structures for decision-making at all levels of the United States. And as long as we continue to practice making collective decisions and listening to each other in the town halls, in school systems, in every corner of society, democracy will stay alive. This is what's quite impressive about humanity. We everywhere on the planet, we crave being able to be heard and understood by other people, and we crave having input and decisions in what is affecting our lives. So whatever country you stand in, you really that sort of drive for a democratic system is there, and so it's not going to go away.
It's not going to go away.
I agree in principle. I think our democracy in the U.S. has been severely wounded in the last year. And one of the things that has struck me is that much of what's made our democracy function are people upholding democratic norms. It's not all codified in our laws. And Trump has been quite masterful at just taking a wrecking ball to those norms. And I think it's so much easier to destroy than to rebuild. I think in Poland and Brazil, we see real efforts to restore democracy after backsliding, but they're having a hard time because so much got dismantled. So I do share your long-term hope, Lisa, but I think what's happened in the U.S. is gravely concerning, and it's going to be hard to recover.
Thank you to you both.